They say you can smell the air before a storm breaks, that metallic tang of ozone, the heavy, pregnant silence that promises chaos. For me, the storm broke not in the sky, but in the sterile, artificially chilled air of the Apex Innovations conference room on a Tuesday morning. And the only thing I could smell was the cloying, expensive cologne of the CEO's nephew, a fresh-faced kid named Julian who had been with the company for all of 3 months. My name is Alina Vance, and for 7 years, Apex Innovations had been my life, my identity, my second skin. I'd started as a bright-eyed junior developer, and through a decade's worth of all-nighters, missed birthdays, and sacrificed weekends, I had clawed my way to the brink of leadership. I wasn't just a senior project lead. I was the backbone of the entire Orion Project, the company's flagship AI initiative. I knew its code like the lines on my own palms, could soothe its digital tantrums, and had personally nursed it from a clumsy prototype to the multi-million-dollar marvel it was today. The promotion to Director of Digital Architecture wasn't just a next step, it was a promise, whispered in the quiet moments by Robert himself. Robert Sterling, our CEO, a man I had once respected. He'd pull me aside after a successful launch, his hand on my shoulder, and say, "Alina, this company rests on the shoulders of warriors like you. When Marshall retires, the chair is yours. I need my best player in that game." He said that. My best player. For 18 months, I operated with that promise as my North Star. I mentored my team, not as a boss, but as a future leader preparing her successors. I took on the projects no one else wanted, the bureaucratic nightmares, the client fires that threatened to burn the whole place down. I built the Orion team into a family, a tight-knit unit of brilliant, slightly cynical, and fiercely loyal individuals. There was Ben, our code whisperer with a sarcastic wit sharper than any compiler. Chloe, our UX designer who could read a user's mind through analytics. And David, our stoic systems architect who spoke in elegant logic and quiet support. We were a machine, and I was the engine. The day the announcement was scheduled, I walked into the office with a quiet confidence. I'd even worn my power suit, a sharp navy blue blazer that felt like armor. The plan was a 10 a.m. all-hands meeting. Marshall, the current director, was already packing his office, giving me a knowing, grandfatherly smile. "Ready for the hot seat, Vance?" he'd asked. I just smiled back. Born ready. As my team filed into the large conference room, they shot me winks and thumbs up. They knew. Everyone knew. The air was buzzing with a celebratory energy that I was supposed to be the center of. Robert Sterling took the podium, his smile wide and practiced. Team, settle down," he began, his voice booming through the speakers. "We're here today to celebrate a moment of transition, of growth, and of exciting new leadership for the Orion Project and beyond." My heart hammered a steady, triumphant rhythm against my ribs. This was it. I smoothed my blazer, ready to stand, to accept the applause, to finally have the title that matched the responsibility I'd carried for years. "The role of Director of Digital Architecture is a crucially demanding one," Robert continued, his eyes scanning the crowd. They passed over me, a fleeting glance without a flicker of recognition. A cold, tiny knot began to form in my stomach. It requires not just technical expertise, but vision, fresh ideas, and a dynamic new perspective to lead us into the next decade. Fresh ideas, dynamic perspective. The words felt wrong. They were the buzzwords you used for an external hire, not for someone who had built the very foundation he was standing on. And then he dropped the bomb. That's why, after a rigorous and global search, I am thrilled to announce that effective immediately, our new director is Julian Sterling. The silence that followed was not peaceful, it was violent. It was the sound of a vacuum, of all the air and all the sound being sucked out of the room. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. Sterling, the same surname. And then, from the corner of the room, Julian, the 22-year-old with a degree in business management and a portfolio that consisted of, as far as I knew, reorganizing the cloud storage drive, stood up. He was smirking, a faint, smug curl of his lips as he adjusted his tailored suit jacket. Nepotism. The word echoed in the hollowed-out cavern of my mind. It wasn't a global search. It was a family appointment. The scattered, confused applause was led by the senior sycophants who sat near the boardroom table. I looked at my team. Ben's face was a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. Chloe looked like she'd been physically slapped. David simply stared at his hands, his jaw clenched so tight I thought it might crack. Robert beamed with paternal pride. Julian has shown incredible initiative and a revolutionary understanding of the market in his short time here. I have no doubt he will take the Orion Project to heights we can only dream of. Heights he couldn't even spell. Julian's one revolutionary idea had been to suggest we change the company's primary font, claiming it would increase user engagement. I sat through the rest of the meeting numb. I felt the heat of 100 pitying glances on my skin. I was a specter at my own funeral. Robert finally concluded. And of course, a special thanks to Alina Vance, who has been a wonderful stalwart for the project. I know she'll give Julian her full support. Stalwart? It sounded like a rock. An old, immovable, unglamorous rock. The meeting adjourned. People hurried out, avoiding my eyes. Julian was immediately surrounded by well-wishers. As I stood on shaky legs, Robert caught my eye and gestured me over. "Alina, a word," he said, his voice dripping with false warmth. He led me to a quiet corner away from the dispersing crowd. "I know this might be a bit of a surprise," he began, his tone patronizing. "But I need you to understand the bigger picture. Julian has connections. He brings a certain energy we need. This is a strategic move for the company." I stared at him, my voice trapped in my throat. Strategic, it was a handout, a blatant, insulting handout. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a confidential murmur. "I need you, Alina. You're the real backbone here. I need you to guide him, to teach him the ropes. Consider yourself his mentor. Your loyalty during this transition won't be forgotten." And there it was, the final gut-wrenching twist of the knife. Not only was I being passed over, but I was now expected to train my unqualified, privileged replacement. I was to build the throne so he could sit on it. I looked over Robert's shoulder and saw Julian, already in his new office. Leaning back in the ergonomic chair and propping his expensive leather shoes on the desk I had chosen. The storm that had been brewing in the conference room finally broke inside me. But it wasn't a storm of tears or screams. It was a storm of ice-cold, crystalline clarity. Robert mistook my silence for compliance. He patted my arm. "That's my girl. I knew I could count on you." He walked away, leaving me standing alone in the hallway. The girl he could count on, the stalwart, the backbone. But as I watched Julian through the glass wall, laughing at something on his phone, a single, decisive thought formed in the frozen stillness of my rage. A backbone can be removed, and without it, the whole body collapses. The days that followed the announcement were a masterclass in psychological warfare, waged in the silent, sterile battlefield of the Apex Innovations office. I became a ghost in the machine, but a ghost with a purpose. I smiled in meetings. I nodded as Julian, from his throne in my old office, presented flowcharts he didn't understand and used buzzwords like synergistic paradigm shifts and disruptive leveraging. The words were empty calories, and everyone in the room knew it, but the sycophants nodded along, their heads bobbing like buoys in a sea of willful ignorance. My team, my beautiful, brilliant team, was crumbling. The light had gone out of their eyes. Ben's sarcasm had turned dark and biting, aimed at any of Julian's inane suggestions. Chloe's designs, once vibrant and intuitive, became sluggish and uninspired. David worked in a state of silent, seething fury, his logical mind offended by the sheer illogic of our new reality. Robert Sterling saw none of it. He floated through the office on a cloud of self-congratulation, convinced his strategic move was a stroke of genius. He'd pop by my desk, his voice a low, conspiratorial murmur. "How's he doing, Alina? You're a rock star, you know that? The way you're guiding him, priceless." Every word was another shovelful of dirt on the grave of my loyalty. I was no longer Alina Vance, the engineer. I was Alina Vance, the human crutch for an incompetent heir. The breaking point, the moment the plan crystallized from a vengeful fantasy into a concrete blueprint, came 2 weeks into Julian's reign. He called a strategy meeting for the Orion Project. We all filed in, taking our seats around the large table. Julian stood at the head, a giant monitor behind him. "Team," he began, with the unearned confidence of someone who has never faced consequences. "I've been analyzing our core architecture, and I've identified a critical bottleneck." He pulled up a complex diagram of our data flow, a system I had personally architected over 3 years. It was elegant, efficient, and robust. "This nexus here," he said, pointing a laser pointer at the very heart of the system, "is overly complicated. It's legacy code. We're going to streamline it. We'll rip out this entire module and replace it with a simpler, off-the-shelf solution I read about in a tech blog." A cold dread trickled down my spine. The module he was pointing to was the Authentication and Security Core. It wasn't legacy. It was battle-tested, secure, and custom-built to handle our specific, sensitive data loads. The simpler solution he was proposing was notoriously vulnerable, a cheap tool used for basic apps, not for an AI handling billion-dollar contracts. David was the first to speak, his voice dangerously calm. "Julian, that module handles all of our encryption and user verification. Replacing it with that particular tool would introduce significant security vulnerabilities. It's not designed for this scale or complexity." Julian waved a dismissive hand. "That's fear-based thinking, David. We need to be agile. We can't be held back by old code just because someone is sentimental about it." His eyes flickered to me. "Someone." Ben leaned forward, his voice a low growl. "So, your agile plan is to introduce a gaping security hole into the core of our multi-million-dollar project. Brilliant. Maybe we should just post the user passwords on the company blog for efficiency." Julian's face flushed. "I don't appreciate the tone, Ben. The decision is made. I want it implemented by the end of the month." He moved on, but the air in the room had turned to lead. We were no longer a team building the future. We were hostages on a ship being steered directly into an iceberg by a captain who thought the compass was broken because the needle moved. That evening, I didn't go home. I sat at my desk in the empty, humming office, the city lights twinkling like distant stars outside the window. I opened a blank document. The cursor blinked, a steady, patient metronome. I typed a single name, Isabel Rossi. Isabel had been my rival once. A fierce, brilliant woman who had left Apex 2 years prior after a clash with Robert over ethics to found her own startup, OmniaCore. We'd butted heads constantly, but the respect between us was immense and unshakable. She had tried to poach me once, a year ago. I'd turned her down out of loyalty to Apex. I still had her personal cell number. My fingers trembled only slightly as I typed the email. It was short, direct, and devoid of emotion. "Isabel, I hope this finds you well. The landscape at Apex has shifted. Drastically. I recall our past conversation and find myself reevaluating the future. I believe OmniaCore might be pursuing new ventures in the AI architecture space. If that is the case, and if your offer to discuss opportunities still stands, I am now available. And I am not alone. Best, Elena." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The message felt less like an email and more like the trigger of a detonator. Her reply came in less than 10 minutes. "Elena, your timing is, as always, impeccable. Let's talk. Tomorrow, 7 p.m., the Atlas Cafe, and Elena, come with your team." The following evening, I gathered my core 4, Ben, Chloe, and David, in a private booth at the back of the Atlas Cafe. The air was thick with the smell of coffee and anticipation. They looked at me, confused but trusting. "I didn't bring you here to complain," I began, my voice low and steady. "I brought you here to present a choice. Isabel Rossi is meeting us here in 5 minutes." Ben's eyes widened. "Rossi, the queen of code. She's building a rival platform, isn't she?" "She is," I confirmed. "And she's looking for a team. A full, experienced, ready-to-build team. She wants to create what we wanted to build here before we were redirected." Chloe leaned in, her voice a whisper. "Elena, are you talking about all of us leaving?" "What is left for us here?" David asked, his logical mind already calculating the variables. Our work is being dismantled by a child. Our leadership is a joke. Our professional integrity is being compromised. I looked at each of them. This isn't just about a job. It's about a principle. Robert and Julian believe we are interchangeable parts, that our loyalty is a given, our talent a commodity. I want to show them the true cost of their arrogance. I want to show them what happens when you remove the foundation. Ben was the first to break into a grin, a sharp, predatory thing. You want to burn it all down. Not burn, I corrected, a cold smile finally touching my lips. I want to relocate the entire city and leave them standing in a ghost town. Isabel arrived then, a whirlwind of sharp intelligence and a sleek black coat. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. She slid into the booth, looked at our faces, and nodded. "Tell me everything," she said. And we did. We told her about Julian, about the security folly, about the humiliation, about the slow, grinding death of morale. She listened, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of sympathy and fierce opportunity. When we finished, she placed her tablet on the table. On it was a preliminary design for a next-generation AI architecture. It was bold, beautiful, and everything the Orion Project could have been. "This is what we're building at Omnia," she said. "But it's just a skeleton. It needs a heart. It needs a nervous system. It needs a soul." She looked at me, then at each member of my team. "I'm not offering you jobs. I'm offering you a partnership. I want you to be the founding technical team of Omnia Core. Equity, autonomy, the freedom to build something world-changing without the poison." She laid out the offer. It was staggering. The salaries were competitive, but the equity was a golden handcuff of a different kind, a stake in a future we would own. The titles were what we had earned. Chief Technology Officer for me, Lead Architect for David, Head of Design for Chloe, Principal Engineer for Ben. It was more than an escape. It was a coronation. We didn't need to discuss it. The looks we exchanged were a silent, unanimous vote. We were in. The next phase was the most delicate, the quiet recruitment. Over the next week, we operated like a secret society. We identified the 12 other key engineers, designers, and analysts on the Orion team, the true talents, not the dead weight. One by one, we met them in coffee shops, in parks after work. We showed them Isabel's vision. We presented the offer. The response was unanimous. Every single one of them agreed. The lure wasn't just the money or the titles. It was the chance to salvage their professional pride, to build something great again, and to deliver a message to Robert Sterling that would echo through the entire industry. 2 days before D-Day, I drafted a single, simple, and devastating email. I addressed it to Robert Sterling with a CC to HR. The subject line was blank. The body contained only 2 sentences. I saved it as a draft. I then created a group email with all 17 of my departing colleagues. The plan was simple. We would all hand in our physical resignations to HR at 9:05 a.m. At 9:10 a.m., the moment the HR department was in a state of panic, I would hit send on my draft. The night before, I stood on my balcony, looking out at the city that housed the Apex Tower. I felt no anxiety, no fear, only a serene, icy calm. The storm I had felt brewing weeks ago was finally arriving. But I was no longer standing in the rain. I was the one holding the lightning. Robert Sterling was about to learn that the quiet ones, the rocks and the backbones, were the most dangerous when they finally decided to move. The morning of the Exodus dawned bright and clear, a cruel and beautiful mockery of the chaos we were about to unleash. I dressed with the meticulous care of a soldier preparing for battle, each piece of my attire a piece of armor. My reflection showed a woman transformed. The weary resignation was gone, replaced by a steely, unshakable calm. The rock was about to become a landslide. At 8:55 a.m., I walked into the Apex Innovations lobby for the last time. The air smelled the same, of lemon-scented cleaner and ambition. But today it was the scent of a past life. I rode the elevator to the 12th floor, my heart beating a slow, powerful rhythm of certainty. My team, my 17 co-conspirators, were already at their desks, a perfectly orchestrated tableau of normalcy. Ben gave me a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Chloe offered a small, tense smile. David's gaze was steady and sure. The plan was in motion. At 9:05 a.m. precisely, as if controlled by a single, silent clock, we all stood. The synchronized movement was unnerving, a choreography of descent. We didn't speak. We simply began to walk, a quiet, determined procession, towards the HR department. The soft cacophony of keyboards and mouse clicks in the open plan office dwindled, then died, replaced by a bewildered silence as our colleagues watched us pass. The HR department, a glass-walled enclosure usually buzzing with mundane admin, became the epicenter of the earthquake. Sarah, the head of HR, looked up from her computer, her smile of professional welcome freezing and then shattering as she saw not one, but 18 of the company's most critical employees forming a quiet, orderly queue in front of her desk. "Elena, what's all this?" she stammered, her eyes darting from my face to the others behind me. I placed my single-page, formal resignation letter on her desk. "My resignation, Sarah, effective immediately." One by one, my team followed suit. Ben, Chloe, David, and then the 12 others, each laying down their own letter like a card in a winning hand. The stack grew, a monument to Robert Sterling's catastrophic miscalculation. Sarah's face paled, her hand fluttering to her throat. I don't understand. Is this some kind of protest?" "It's a mass resignation," I said, my voice even and clear, carrying in the dead silence of the floor. "We are all leaving today, now." The panic in her eyes was immediate and profound. She fumbled for her phone, her fingers clumsy. "I need to call Robert. You all need to wait here." We didn't wait. As she dialed with a trembling hand, we turned and walked back to our desks to collect our personal belongings. The office was a tomb, every eye glued to us. Whispers began to rise, a rising tide of shock and realization. Back at my desk, I opened my laptop for the last time. I navigated to my draft folder and opened the email addressed to Robert Sterling. The cursor blinked in the subject line. I typed 5 words that I knew would be the final nail in his coffin: the cost of nepotism. I moved the cursor to the body of the email, which contained the 2 sentences I had crafted days ago. "Robert, you told me my loyalty wouldn't be forgotten. It wasn't. It was the foundation upon which we built our exit strategy. Best regards, Elena Vance, former senior project lead, and the entire Orion Project team." I highlighted the CC line and added every member of the board of directors. My finger hovered over the mouse. At that exact moment, Robert Sterling exploded out of the elevator, his face a thundercloud of fury and confusion. He stormed towards me, his voice a roar that shattered the fragile silence. "VANCE, what the hell is going on? Is this your doing?" I looked up from my screen, meeting his enraged gaze without flinching. The entire floor was watching, a captive audience to the downfall of a king. "It's simple mathematics, Robert," I said, my voice calm, cutting through his bluster. "You invested in one unqualified person. You overlooked 18 essential ones. The equation was always going to balance itself." His eyes dropped to my screen, reading the email. I saw the exact moment the words registered. The fury in his face drained away, replaced by a dawning, gut-wrenching horror. He saw the CC list, the board. He understood that this wasn't a private spat, this was a public execution of his leadership. "Elena, don't," he breathed, his voice dropping, becoming almost pleading. "Let's talk about this in my office. We can fix this. Whatever you want, the director title, a 50% raise, just name it." I gave him a small, cold smile, the same smile he had given me when he called me his girl. "It was never about the title, Robert, and it's certainly not about the money. It was always about respect. You can't buy that back once you've thrown it in the trash." And I clicked send. The whoosh sound of the email leaving my outbox was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a lock clicking shut, of a bridge exploding into flames behind me. Robert stared at the screen, his shoulders slumping in utter defeat. He was a ruined man, and he knew it. The rest was a beautiful, chaotic blur. We packed our boxes, mugs, photos, a few books, under the stunned gaze of our former colleagues. As I carried my box toward the elevator, Julian emerged from his office. He looked lost, a child who had been given the controls to a spaceship and had just crashed it. "Alina, you can't just leave," he stammered, his voice weak. "The project, I need you." I stopped and turned to him, not with anger, but with a profound, almost pitying finality. "No, Julian," I said softly. "You needed me. Now you have exactly what you and your uncle asked for, the company all to yourselves. I hope the font is engaging enough." The elevator doors slid open. My team and I stepped inside, our boxes held not as symbols of defeat, but as trophies of liberation. As the doors closed, I took one last look at the Apex Innovations logo on the wall. It already looked like a relic. The fallout was swift and brutal, and we watched it from the plush, modern sanctuary of Omnia Core. Isabel had welcomed us with open arms and a fully equipped new wing of offices. We were already deep in the thrilling, frantic work of building our new platform, a project we named Phoenix. But the updates from Apex, fed to us by the few remaining sane contacts, were a source of grim satisfaction. Day 1, the Orion Project's development servers crashed. No one knew how to restart the complex sequence. Day 3, 3 major clients, alerted by the board about the restructuring, called demanding reassurances. When they were put through to a flustered Julian, they immediately requested to pause their contracts. Day 7, the board of directors called an emergency meeting. Robert Sterling was officially removed as CEO. His strategic move, having vaporized hundreds of millions in company value and obliterated investor confidence in a single week. Day 10, Julian Sterling, the boy king, was quietly reassigned, and then resigned, a footnote in the obituary of his uncle's career. Apex Innovations entered a death spiral. Without its core engineering talent, it couldn't innovate. Without innovation, it lost its market share. Within 6 months, it was a ghost of its former self, a cautionary tale whispered in industry circles. Meanwhile, at OmniaCore, we thrived. The Phoenix platform was everything we had dreamed of: secure, intuitive, powerful. Our story, the Apex Exodus, had become legend, and clients flocked to us, wanting to be associated with the team that had values, talent, and backbone. One evening, 6 months after our departure, I stood on the rooftop terrace of the Omnia Core building with my team, now my partners and my true family. We were celebrating the launch of our first major product. Below us, the city glittered, a universe of possibilities. Ben raised his glass. "To Robert Sterling," he said, a wicked grin on his face, "for being the catastrophic failure we all needed to succeed." We laughed, clinking our glasses together under the stars. The bitterness was gone, burned away in the refining fire of our success. The revenge was complete, not because we had destroyed a man, but because we had built something magnificent from the ashes of his betrayal. We hadn't just taken the team, we had taken the future.